All right, welcome to Cwic Show. My name is Greg Mattson. I am your host, and happy Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I just have a few thoughts I wanted to share on Martin Luther King and kind of what's happening today with the polar opposite movement of Black Lives Matter and anti-racism, critical race theory, etc. First of all, I want to talk about Martin Luther King. This man is a hero. He is, I think back, I've studied Martin Luther King, his life, biographies, his works, his speeches, etc. So I'm certainly no expert on him at all, but I'll tell you my conclusions of what I've seen with him. I think he's a miracle. I really do. He has his flaws, his moral flaws, and other flaws that are unfortunate, and they are with any individual. But you see this in a lot of great men, where they've had some moral shortcomings. That doesn't change his message, and it doesn't change his impact. I think about the time that he was in, and moving through the 50s and the 60s, and it is an absolute miracle that this man does not end up a Malcolm X or an Angela Davis, a leader of the Black Panther Party. It's incredible. It really is incredible, the fortitude this man had, because you know the forces that were at play at the time. Right, you had a lot of very strong Marxist movements at the time that were playing in the arena of a black liberation, and the Black Panther Party, Angela Davis as examples here, and many others. And yet here is this man that certainly felt that influence. And it would have been so much easier for him to just give in to that radicalism and appease so many different factions that he was trying to bring together, and he didn't. And yes, there are questionable things that he said. There are questionable actions. There are questionable associations, and maybe some questionable funding even. But I'm just telling you, it is incredible. It is incredible that he comes out of this with all of that influence against him and wins against the radicals in his time. He wins against the radicals and holds up American ideals and classical liberalism and the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. He's not throwing those things under the bus at all. He's holding them up, but he's saying, we are falling short of these ideals, and we have to change. For a large group of people in this country, we have to change, and we have to all be able to participate in this American project to its fullest. And that's, water runs downhill, and he didn't run downhill. And that's why he's a hero to me. Just his ability to spurn those things. I mean, you can see how so many others fell into that trap and easily moved into the hard left radicalism and Marxist movements of the time. Let's just go over a couple of statements that we get from his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. All right, these just notice the difference in the statements here, the words as compared to what you get today with today's movements that are basically, in my mind, they appropriate Martin Luther King where they feel it suits them, as if it's a new civil rights movement. It is not. Here's an example. Now is the time to lift our nation, right? Lift our country. It's not break it down. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksand of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. That is the right message. That is the message against Ibram Kendi. That is the message of assimilation under American idealism and tenets of freedom and liberty. Ibram Kendi calls that whiteness. Ibram Kendi wants to destroy those things. He wants to overthrow them. He doesn't want brotherhood. He doesn't want to lift the nation up. To him, the nation is evil. Here's what we get in the statement right before his most famous statement. This is important. He says, I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. In other words, the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution and the Scottish Enlightenment and its ideals and everything that founded America is right, is good, but we're not living up to it. Now listen to these statements right before his most famous statement in this speech. I quote, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. Try and get that out of an Ibram Kendi or the formers of the founders of Black Lives Matter. He goes on, I quote, I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. And then he goes on and quotes the Declaration of Independence. He says, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. That is the right message. He is again, just piercing light against the radical background that went on in his time. And then he finally gets to his famous statement, which is, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by their character. Man, have we come a long way from that. And I don't mean in a good way. I mean, good way in terms of actual racism in the country, yes, improved immensely over the last 60 years. But where the new social justice movement is today, they don't care about your character. They don't care about your behavior. In fact, they want to throw responsibility off of character. They don't. This character here is inherently about your meritocracy, about your choices. That is thrown out the window with today's social justice movement. And will not be judged by the color of their skin. Are you kidding me? That is critical race theory. To be judged by the color of your skin, to be thrown into groups by the color of your skin, to make sure that race and color are the filters through which we view our world. The social justice movement today only appropriates Martin Luther King when it fits them. The truth is, the founders of critical race theory, who are very much based in a Marxian tenets and pulling an infusion of postmodernism and radical feminism, they want to bypass that. They never wanted this. They did not want what Martin Luther King had, what he taught. That was too American. It was too based on liberty and classical liberal tenets. But the radicals lost in the 60s. And Martin Luther King paid for his message with his blood. Since then, those radicals who never went away, who were on the campuses of America, got a little bit stronger and a little bit stronger and a little bit stronger. They invited people from all over the world with similar backgrounds, similar agendas and politics. And we began to get this percolation of a new type of Marxian involvement and agenda that focused more on culture, very Marcusean, right? And then you get the postmodernists that come along and radical feminism, and you get this amalgamation of a new way of moving through the institutions of the United States with a hard left, anti-American philosophy. As an example, Ibram Kendi, in his book Stamped from the Beginning, who is his number one anti-racist? The person he holds up the highest as the best possible example of an anti-racist, which means something very specific. That is not just someone who is against racism at all, right? It is an ideology. Who is it? It's Angela Davis. Angela Davis, Martin Luther King could have become an Angela Davis. Angela Davis is what ran for the vice presidency of the U.S. Communist Party. She's a self-proclaimed communist. She fights constantly against classical liberalism and democracy. That's who Ibram Kendi holds up as the best possible anti-racist. So if you happen to be an anti-racist today and you've read Ibram Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, just imagine you can aspire to be an Angela Davis, because that's his best example of an anti-racist. He championed Castro over the United States. And not just back in the time where Castro took over in the Cuban Revolution, but just recently with the crackdown that we had last year in Cuba. He supported the communist regime over the people. And again, people don't understand this. They think that saying that CRT or anti-racism is Marxist is some kind of conspiracy. It's so bizarre. It is so bizarre because these people are outright, blatantly telling you who they are and what they believe. Here's Richard Delgado in Critical Race Theory talking about liberalism and the liberal order that Martin Luther King Jr. held up very high, with high esteem, right? He's talking about what is critical race theory. And Richard Delgado, this is Richard Delgado and Gene Stefanczyk. They're a couple of the founders, along with Kimberly Crenshaw and a couple others, of critical race theory. Here's what they call critical race theory. The critical race theory movement, right? It's not a theory, really. It's a misnomer. It is a movement. They call it a movement. Is a collection of activists. You have to be an activist. And scholars engaged in studying and transforming the relationship among race, racism, and power. The movement considers many of the same issues that conventional civil rights, i.e. Martin Luther King Jr., and ethnic studies discourses take up, but places them in a broader perspective that includes, and this is why it's everywhere, right? You have so many people that tell you, oh, I know what critical race theory is. It's just this in this legal studies. No, here he goes on to say that includes economics, history, setting, group, and self-interest, and emotions and the unconscious. And we can say today that considers every institution in the United States. Unlike traditional civil rights discourse, i.e. Martin Luther King Jr., which stresses incrementalism, I don't believe that, and step-by-step progress, critical race theory questions the very foundations of the liberal order, including equality theory, legal reasoning, enlightenment rationalism, and neutral principles of constitutional law. They don't believe that there should be a universal law for everybody. That we're not going to go into that right now, but it's not liberalism, right? It's not constitutional liberal. They don't believe in it. And so when I put up an episode like I did the other day on critical race theory, Reaching the Deseret Book, and the comments that you get from people that are entrenched into critical race theory and anti-racism, the sad truth, not always, but the sad truth, most of them don't even know what they are signing up for, what tenets they are actually grabbing onto. Remember, Ibram Kendi is the most popular critical race theorist there is. Most people involved in getting involved with anti-racism and then educating others, as I had several people in the comments telling me that I needed to be educated. That's like re-educated, indoctrinated. That comes from Ibram Kendi. And all he's doing is pulling from people like Angela Davis and Marcuse and others that have gone through this before. This is all the same stuff being spewed out over and over again. Anyway, this is not meant to be a thorough examination of Martin Luther King or a thorough examination of the contrast between him and the current movement of critical race theory and Black Lives Matter, anti-racism, etc. But I did just want to get out the message. Number one, and most importantly for me, especially today, is to please champion Martin Luther King Jr. Some of you are probably reticent to do that. And I hope you can see the amazing contrast, the incredible obstacles that were overcome by this man, and how he didn't fall into these traps. It's a miracle. It really is. It's a miracle that he did what he did. And number two, holding him up on a pedestal as a miracle, we can take that and contrast that with what's happening today. Those radicals he fought against, those ideologies that he did not fall into, are the ones that are prevalent today. And they lost at the time of Martin Luther King, but they are now winning today. I hope you can see and distinguish between those two things. It's imperative that we do. When you sign up with empathy to fight against racism, do not conflate it with a pernicious, hard left Marxian ideology. Because 99 out of 100 times today, throughout the institutions and the media is an institution, but throughout work and news and media and books, everything else, you're going to be doing exactly that. Because that is how it is delivered. And it's like any truth or lie that we get, just like we get with Lucifer in the Garden of Eden, right? Your eyes will be opened and you'll be like the gods. Yeah, well, that's the truth. But the lie is, you shall not surely die. Both of those things are put in there together. And so there's a truth that's put in, like, let's fight against racism. And then there's a lie that's put in, I'm putting this in and attaching something to this that is very pernicious, a virus, a cancer. It's like, how do we make America, from Gramsci and through critical theory and Marcuse and Adorno and Horkheimer and others, how do we make America swallow this pill? God, they won't do it. How do we make America swallow this pill? Well, as Julie Andrews says, a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down.